My name is Dipayan, you're watching Auto Today and you're joining us for the review of this. This is the new generation of the BMW M2. Now, it gets a whole lot of styling updates, but the headlines are, of course, that it gets the new engine from the BMW M3 and the M4, of course, with a slight detune. But before we jump into the driving dynamics, let's talk a little bit about the design. You know what, maybe the M2 is a car that's best enjoyed from the driver's seat. So let's hop in the driver's seat and find out how she drives. And now you're joining me behind the wheel of the brand new second generation M2. And straight up, let me give you the hard talking points, which are that it now gets a new engine. This is the same engine that we've seen on this present generation of the M3 and the M4, albeit in a slightly lower state of tune. It makes about 460 horsepower and 550 Nm of torque. Now, while that is significantly more than the previous generation and just 20 horsepower less than the base version of the M4, this does seem a little bit slower on the uptake than the older car. Of course, that is a part of the intentional design by BMW to make the M2 more accessible and a little less crazy than it has been. Of course, this particular variant also gets the manual gearbox, which will be an extra over the price of the standard, which comes with the ZF 8-speed Steptronic. Now, of course, this 6-speed manual gearbox is really nice and shifts well, although I would have liked slightly shorter throws when you do shift. Another thing that I've noticed with this M2 is that this is a really track-oriented car, which means you really need to work the turbos to get out the power, which means you need to be beyond the 4,000-5,000 RPM band before you really start seeing fireworks. Now, of course, it does have an auto blip function which saves you a little bit of heel toe, but I like to turn it off and do it manually. But that's really a personal choice and may differ from driver to driver. Now, when we're talking about the dimensions of this car, we know that the M2 has gotten significantly bigger, which means that it now has a wider track at the front, a wider track at the rear. It is longer, which does mean that you have more usable space in the second row. But does that make the M2 fat? Is it now a heavier car to drive? Is it more difficult to drive? Is it more of a handful? Well, as far as that goes, that is strictly not true. This one is so much more manageable, and in fact, when you've got everything in comfort, this feels like an everyday car, until of course you shift down, work the gearbox and get that beautiful M note. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about with this car is just how precise it is through the corners. You can really work that gearbox and get that precision. Another thing that stands out to me about the M2 is the fact that this is probably the last manual M car that we are likely to see in our lifetimes, and that makes it kind of extra special. And the way it just manages that slip is just so phenomenal. It really makes driving feel the way it's supposed to be. Now, when we talk about the cabin of the M2, it is a really nice place to be, especially from the driver's seat. You get this massive single screen curved unit that is 14.9 inches across, and it really adds some life to the cabin without really feeling Spartan or race car-ish per se. Of course, to remind you that this is in fact a sports car, you have a whole lot of carbon fiber here along the dash. You get carbon fiber along the center console trims as well, and you get this really cool 50 years of BMW M series moniker on the door panel as well, which looks really cool. Now, when it comes to the tires of the BMW M2, you get 19-inch wheels up front and a set of 20-inch wheels at the back, which means you have a staggered setup. that also helps because this is a rear wheel drive only car and there is going to be some slip in the corners, and those nice fat Pirelli P0s really work well in ensuring that there's always grip at the back and you can just layer on that power when you want it. So finally, it's that feeling of driving a manual car, sending it slightly sideways and then going again while you work that gearbox. It's something that we'll probably not get to experience later on in our life. So if you are looking for a really nice manual sports car, I think the M2 makes a lot of sense for you. Whew. And now that we've had a chance to appreciate the BMW M2 from the driver's seat where you belong, let's take a look at the design once again and see how it matches up. You know what, now that I've spent some time with it and gotten a chance to see how it looks in the pictures, I can really get used to this boxy front end that has been a polarizing design for many. Now of course there are a lot of GT3 inspired cues like the wide body that goes right to the back. Of course this BMW misses out on that strong shoulder line that has been a trend for BMWs all through the 2010s. So this does really represent that new generation. Another thing I really like are of course the ORVMs that stick out and look super aero and of course add to the aerodynamic stability of the car. That said, let's check out the back and see what the BMW M2 looks like from the rear. Relative to the front, the rear of the BMW M2 is almost minimal, but it does carry forward that geometric theme of the front. But the main attraction, the centerpiece of the rear profile of the BMW M2, of course, are those exceptional looking exposed quad pipes. Now another question you're going to have if you're in the market for an M2 is the fact that it has 4 seats and whether they're actually usable. So what I've done is I've adjusted the seat back on the front seat to my setting, which means I still have a little knee room and of course I have enough space. And my colleague Anag, who is 5'8", is sitting in the back and he still has a little knee room as well as a little headroom, which is not something you get to say every day about a two-door coupe. And that was our review of the brand new second generation BMW M2. Now if you like this video, of course don't forget to hit that like button, it means so much to us. And if you aren't already subscribed to the Auto Today channel, do that now and hit that little bell icon so you get notified every time we drop a new video. Now when it comes to this new generation of M2, we all know the headlines. It has gotten longer, it has gotten wider and it has gotten a little bit softer as well. But that just means it's that much more accessible, and that really doesn't take away from how fast it actually is. It may not be as mental as the M2 of the past, the competition and the CS, but of course when it comes to being faster, this car will probably set a faster lap time and be safer too. So I don't think that's something that you really takes away from the spirit of the M2. That's all for our review. This is Didi signing off.